The Islanders have an impossible decision to make, and it is not going to get any easier. Yesterday, the preseason continued against the New York Rangers, and several key young players for the Islanders stood out, and we're going to discuss it on this episode of Islanders Digest, along with talking about how the game went. We're not going to go into too much detail on the game. We will do that for the regular season. Before the preseason, there's not too much emphasis or too much you can take away from the play of the team as a whole, but it is good to talk about some things, and there are some slightly concerning trends with the New York Islanders. But what we really want to focus on this video is the standouts. And really, to me, there was no bigger standout, again, for the second straight game for the New York Islanders than Calum Ritchie. Now, it is notable that Matthew Schaefer did not play in this game. He likely is playing today, but in the two games that Calum Ritchie has played, he has really stood out, and it seems like he is really gaining the trust of the New York Islanders. Now, this was the first game where we can say the Islanders have a win, so it is great to see the Islanders finally put together a winning effort, though I would say this is not quite the winning effort you want to see. Rangers goaltender gave up a lot of weak goals. In general, I really was not impressed with the play of a lot of the Rangers. The top six does look flashy, as it is going to be, but for a preseason game, if I was a Ranger fan, I probably was pretty disappointed with that outcome. I am pretty impressed with Gabe Perreault, but Othman, even though he scored a goal on the power play, I felt like he looked almost like Oliver Wahlstrom out there. I think that's kind of the first impression I got, and that's really not the comparison you want to get as a player who has the shot, but everything else is just not coming together. But we're here to focus on the Islanders and their standout players. And there were other standout players other than Calum Ritchie. Calum Ritchie was not the only player that stood out. We're going to talk about Calum Ritchie last in this video. First, I do want to talk about some of these other guys who deserve attention. And one of them was definitely Gleb Veremyev, who you probably noticed considering that he scored two big goals in this game. And Gleb Veremyev, considering he only had 9 minutes and 30 seconds of ice time in this game, he really made every second count, almost to the point where some people are calling for him to make the fourth line for the Islanders after this one game showing. And I will say, Gleb Veremyev is not NHL ready, at least not yet, but this is a player who I do want to keep my eye on. I was pretty exciting when the Islanders signed him out of college. I think he was a player who could turn into something. I said at the time at that video that he just really has all the tools you want from a really strong fourth line player, a guy who can bring a lot of energy to a lineup. And I think this preseason game reaffirmed that. And I was actually surprised that he was able to box out Adam Fox and really get a goal when he was getting covered by a former Norris winning defenseman. Now, if I was a Ranger fan, one thing I would definitely be concerned about is Fox's play after saying he was going to really work on his play all offseason and become a more well-rounded defenseman to make the Olympic team. Really was not impressed. But for Gleb Veremyev, boxing him out and getting a goal, a dirty goal in the crease, that's exactly what you want to see. And again, the offense is not the focus of Gleb Veremyev's game. He's a guy who plays very hard, big body, 6'4". We saw that today. And I think this is a player who, given some more time, can definitely grow into a full-time NHL fourth liner. And honestly, while I don't think he has any chance of making the New York Islanders, there are just so many players that are competitive for this roster. I do think there is a chance that if there are injuries throughout the season, that he might be a player, depending on where the injuries are, who might get a look. And especially after some other players like Matthew and Alex Jeffries did not quite stand out, I think that is definitely something that you cannot factor out this season. Keep an eye on Gleb Veremyev, especially if he has a more successful first full season in Bridgeport for the Islanders. Now, another player who was a standout, and this is not a player who's ever going to play a game for the Islanders, but I thought it was a really cool story. Chris Terry scored a goal after he has not played a preseason game in 7 to 8 years. This is a player who is a career AHLer and a really respected one at that. And it is notable that he is going to be a really good influence for our prospects, including Calum Ritchie, if he does not make the Islanders right off the bat. So it was nice to see him get a chance to play in MSG and score a goal. I was really happy to see that. I almost rather see goals like that than goals like Kyle Palmer's at the end It's good to see Kyle Palmieri score a goal, but really, that does not really matter for him at all, or for the fans, really. But seeing something like this was a good story. Now, I do also want to focus on Isaiah George, who I think quietly is having a very good training camp. I think a lot of people expected more out of Isaiah George. They expected to pop more when he's on the ice. And I want to remind fans that Isaiah George is kind of a defensive defenseman, similar in the mold to a younger Adam Pelech, where when Isaiah George is having a strong game, you're not noticing him. The puck is on and off his stick. He's really not skating too much with the puck. He's just making stuff happen. He's getting the puck out of the zone quickly. And I think in this game, playing mostly against the top six for the New York Rangers, he did a very good job. He played 20 minutes and 40 seconds, and he was a +1. And that's really all you have to know when it comes to Isaiah George's play. Now, I will also say Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock were playing in this game. And while you don't really care how they play, you already know they're going to be your top pair, at least for the start of the year. Schaefer can definitely make things interesting, especially once we get past Christmas. Early on, that's going to be your top pair. And why it was notable is I felt like Ryan Pulock was skating better than I remembered him skating last season. Perhaps just me not watching him for a while. But I really hope that perhaps those injuries that Ryan Pulock has been dealing with in the past with his legs, perhaps he's feeling better now, and we can maybe hope for a bounce back. I made a video earlier this summer talking about how at this point in time his contract is looking like it's aging like one of the worst in hockey. A lot of you were really upset with that. I do want to emphasize, I love Ryan Pulock. I hope he gets back to his game. And if he can skate a little better, like the way we used to see him skating, that's a very encouraging sign. I'm hoping for the best. Sean Day was also playing this game, wasn't really notable. I think of all the Islanders' defensive prospects, if there is an injury, you're likely going to see Isaiah George. I will also say Adam Boqvist had a strong game as well. I expect him to be the extra defenseman for the Islanders this season and maybe get in select games, although I don't think he's going to be playing much, especially considering that Schaefer does a lot of what he can do, and as a result, he's just going to be less valuable for this line. And you definitely don't want Schaefer playing with a player like Adam Boqvist. You want that pairing with Mayfield. So just because of that, I don't think we're going to be seeing too much of him. But again, injuries happen to the defense, so it is good to have a bunch of extra players when you need them, because in the past, the Islanders have certainly needed them. Now let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about, and that is Calum Ritchie, who once again had a very strong game. Now, he didn't have any points, and for some fans, that's disappointing. For me, I feel like there's way too much emphasis on who is scoring in a single preseason game. For example, I think Gleb Veremyev had a very good game, but just because he scored 2 goals doesn't mean he's all of a sudden in consideration for a spot on the New York Islanders. Calum Ritchie had a very strong game today. He played over 20 minutes, which is actually absurd. He played some of the most time on the team, and really, for the forwards, he earned that time. Once again, he was very noticeable, and what I really liked about this game for Calum Ritchie is in the first game against the New Jersey Devils, he was very noticeable on the power play, but he wasn't really getting a chance to make an impact 5-on-5. He was defending well. He was showing that he is capable of defending some of the better units in the NHL, but he wasn't really spending that much time on offense because the Islanders just basically stuck in their zone the entire game. This game was not the case. He was spending time playing against the Rangers' top players, such as JT Miller, playing against that first line, and he handled that responsibility very well. Again, he was not a minus in this game. In addition, he also got some time on the penalty kill. But what really stood out here was when the Islanders got the puck, he spent a lot more time in the offensive zone, and he showed that a lot of that creativity that we saw on the power play is also stuff that he's able to do 5-on-5. He looked very good at getting the puck and moving it quickly, had a couple really good passes that excited me as a fan, getting creative when it comes to getting in the zone. That's something the Islanders really struggle with. I was very happy with his performance 5-on-5, and I'm not the only one. Patrick Waugh agrees, which is very exciting when it comes to whether or not Calum Ritchie is going to make this team. Patrick Waugh said he's very poised with the puck. He moves the puck so well, he spins very well, and he creates space for himself very well. So, I mean, it's interesting for a young guy like him. Another quote he had, which is one that excited me even more, because at the end of the game, when the Islanders are up 1 goal and trying to defend the lead, which for once they actually did, I'm so used to this going to overtime and the Islanders losing a shootout, the regular thing that they kind of made a habit of last season. But Patrick Roy said, I trust him. I like his 200-foot game. He's playing well offensively, but he can also defend. That's the first thing you want to know with younger guys. He's certainly going to make our decision very difficult. And there are two things I really want to emphasize with this quote. The first is Patrick Roy said, I trust him. And that is very notable because he does not trust a lot of players. The fact that Calum Ritchie is already gaining that trust, and again, Patrick Roy played him for 20 minutes in this game. Yes, I know this is a preseason game, but we're not seeing a bunch of young players get a ton of time for the Islanders. It's very clear that Patrick Roy is giving time based on who is earning it. We see that right here with Alex Jeffries only getting 13 minutes and 25 seconds. And frankly, when Alex Jeffries was on the ice, I didn't think he looked all that good. For Calum Ritchie to be getting 20 minutes a game shows a lot of trust from Patrick Roy, and he's handling it well, playing against some of the better players on the New York Rangers. I know Artemi Panarin was not playing in this game, but Gabe Perreault is more than qualified as a prospect to play on that line, at least for this game. For Calum Ritchie to play well defensively against that game, to help the team 6-on-5, it's very impressive at his age, and I think this is going to make this a really interesting decision for the New York Islanders, because this is complex, and in this video I do want to touch on, without getting too long, touch on why this is such a hard decision for the New York Islanders. And a big part of that is he is playing so well defensively as a center, which makes this more challenging because the Islanders simply have another really good defensive center in JG Pageau. I think as Islander fans, we get a little spoiled when it comes to how good our centers have been over the years, where we don't appreciate how good of a third-line center JG Pageau is. Look over at the Rangers Puckpedia. Look at who their top third-line center is. Realistically, if Calum Ritchie was a Rangers prospect, this race would be over. He would have the keys. He would be the third-line center. The Islanders are really deep in this position. Now, they kind of lack that number one game-breaking center, but 1 through 4, they have even 1 through 5, they have a really strong center group. And where this becomes more challenging is with Calum Ritchie, the easiest thing to do is sending him down to the AHL, because you don't have to make another move. You don't have to make a trade. You can hold on to him and then figure it out later. And with Pageau, this is a really complex decision, because you don't want to move Pageau now because the value is just not going to be the highest. But at the same time, what's really becoming an argument, and what I wasn't expecting, is going into the season, I was under the impression that yes, Calum Ritchie in his rookie year is going to be a downgrade from JG Pageau, but it's going to be enough. But after watching these first 2 games, and I understand it's only 2 preseason games, where twice in a row he has been the biggest standout player for the New York Islanders, I'm beginning to wonder if perhaps, especially considering that we finally got to see them play on the same ice today. JG Pageau was in this game, and he looked like his normal self. He hasn't taken a step back or anything like that. But I was starting to wonder, are the Islanders more likely to win a game with Calum Ritchie as your third-line center than JG Pageau? And this is a question I just didn't think Calum Ritchie would be forcing yet. But with that extra offensive element, because he provides more offense by a long shot compared to JG Pageau, and in addition to the defense being proficient, I really wonder if this just fits what the Islanders need more. Now, I'm not saying he's exactly the same. The face-offs are a work in progress, and if he does get sent out to the AHL, that is going to be a priority. But let me know in the comments, do you think the Islanders are a better team on paper with Calum Ritchie? I did not think we'd be having this conversation this early into the season, but he has really impressed me. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. Catch you on the next episode of Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders.